Well, I notice in crowded conversations, so when he says crowded conversations, what he means are when he's in like a group setting, basically. So not all social situations, but in a group setting. I tend to take a back seat and let others be more active. My thinking is kinda, it's not worth jumping in here. I'm sure someone else will echo my thoughts. And then because I do this, I feel disengaged from the conversation and disconnected from people in it or invisible. And that point was kind of speaking to a larger point of nihilism, basically like feeling
Right.
a bit nihilistic, um, similar to what we talked about last time, but kind of from the sense there's like a lack of drive. There's a lack of aliveness, like going into things. Whereas before, maybe somebody might have been really active in a conversation because in self-help it says that you need to be the leader or you need to be active and that kind of thing. But then suddenly people have relaxed and they got much more comfortable in silence, which is actually a massive growth potential. However, they're doing it at the expense or coming from the place of it doesn't matter anyway, right? So, what's kind of sparking in you when I share those kind of topics that I think a lot of people will probably be struggling with, or at least if they're not struggling with it, they can relate to it, and it's holding them back in subtle or not so subtle ways to actually really
Yeah.
give and be in life. Because this is the problem that me and you struggled with as well when we were deep in
Mm.
that 3 hours meditation a day, plus shadow work, plus doing calls, just getting into this real kind of like the actual definition of monk mode, at least for me. But I remember us having some discussions, but obviously you can correct me if I'm wrong. We also felt really disengaged. Like there was a certain level of disengagement from life and enjoyment,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely, I suppose a couple of things are arising for me. The first one would be more relating to that situation where there's kind of a newfound peace in not needing to drive conversation, not needing to do it from that place.
Yeah.
But then there's also the construct of maybe the old part of you that's like, oh, we should do it. But then also that nihilistic construct that you spoke of, oh, we
Mhm.
don't need to. There's no point, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just the peace that's like beyond the boundaries of active or receptive.
Of
It could
energy,
be,
really.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just like can play within both.
Yeah.
It kind of now we're into just receptive.
Yeah.
And so there's curiosities around that emerging. And then you said something else, but now I've completely forgotten what it was. See, the Iraqi food is
No, it's
destroying my
okay.
memory today, but it's
Yeah,
okay.
Cameron just
So
ate a
maybe
massive
explore
meal
this.
before this.
That's right. Which
Talking
is
about
like not
energy.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
I could
suppose
get
what
it up
arises for
again.
me,
No, no, no
let's
worries.
explore this and then we can
Okay.
go back to that because there's some cool stuff
Yep.
there. I
Yep.
suppose what arises for me is often when I've been in that situation, I don't know if it's similar for you, where you're kind of enjoying the new place. And
Yeah.
there's a little bit of the old thing of maybe you should do action.
Yeah.
But then also you're not feeling that just being in like receptivity is what you want. And there's kind of that confusion because you don't want to go back to the old one.
Yeah.
But this doesn't feel fully it.
Yeah.
Like, well, there's something out there that I want. There's something
Yeah.
within that doing that is relevant to me,
Yeah.
right? That it is maybe expansive and is maybe alive. But I don't want to be doing it from the, oh, I should be talking so I'm really cool and growing and doing all this self-development or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And what I found interesting is very often there's just these almost this third wall that we don't quite see, where it's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this. And now this is the only thing I can do, right?
Yeah.
I can't go back to this.
Would it be fair to
And
say
also,
it's almost like identifying with it? Is that what you're kind of, or
yeah, a
making an
little bit of
identity out of
identifying
it?
with it. Yeah, exactly. It's almost the identity of aversion. It's
Yeah.
like I don't want to do that because that when I did it that way, it was bad.
Yeah.
And to be fair, it kind of was a bit like a lot of tension, not so
Yeah,
much fun, like
yeah,
bullying yourself to do things all the time. Not so
yeah,
much fun. It's totally understandable to
yeah.
want to be in a little bit of peace for a while.
Hmm.
But then there's that evolution of it can include both.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with being active in the world
yeah.
from this peace.
If
And then just being curious. Go on.
yeah, I was just if I could piggyback on that, don't ever be afraid of doing something where you don't quite know what the evolution of something is. Like Cameron just said, there's an evolution there. But a lot of the time, what stops us from stepping into that evolution, especially when it comes to this theme that we're talking about now, where we just came out of a paradigm where we were doing, and we actually got a lot of the success that we were looking for. And now what's birthed is a much more introspection, looking inward, seeing what's actually happening within us and coming from that place. And we're still able to do, obviously, like we haven't gone the other side, which happens sometimes where people just completely stop and quit everything, right? We still want to achieve some things. But when we're speaking from this theme and from this place, there is a next evolution, but don't rush so much to try and figure that out mentally before you jump in, because
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. Doesn't work like that. Like if you
Yeah.
look at how you have evolved from childhood to now, when you were a child or a teenager, did you ever know what the next stage was? You kind of had little like suggestions or impressions of maybe what it could look like maybe you have an older brother or an older sister, or you have parents, or you had people in different years. If you went to school and you were able to socialize with people older and younger than you, you might have had some kind of idea, but you were never able to fully have a mental model before you go into that, right? That's just what's coming up for me when you were saying evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I suppose then if we go real practical,
Yeah,
what I find is you can't jump to what the evolution is going to be, but you can gently explore the emerging resistance or aversion
yeah,
or allergy if it seems to be arising,
yeah,
especially at this stage where often the aversion can be more active things. And
mhm,
we associate the active with just purely how it used to be instead of what may emerge um, in the evolution. But like you said, you can only take that first step into it. And then being really, a lot of people who are probably watching this, they are doing their shadow work, they've done their meditation, hypnotherapy, whatever it may be, and they're at a stage, and that probably brought them into this stage. But I think one of the things that clicked for me around that time was, oh, I can be active with this.
yeah,
Like there's a little resistance here when I'm maybe doing some outreach, right, or on a sales call, but maybe when I can just gently push into that and also explore it as well, right? What's creating this
yeah,
resistance? What's creating this aversion? And then suddenly, when there's no aversion this way or this way, that wholeness just emerges where we can have
yeah,
peace actively, receptively, in
yeah,
reciprocity. It just we're able to be in all of it.
yeah.
And what I'm curious about as well for you, because was this from a client that this was arising, or did this
Yeah,
conversation spur from?
this was from like part of my one-on-one coaching, mentorship. I like to make videos for certain people based on what we've talked about, maybe stuff that we might want not to we might not want to dedicate like paid time to, so just as something extra, I make a video and they can research something or I can point them in the right direction. But it actually speaks to a general theme of a lot of people that get into this work, you know. It's not that they haven't had, like, they can't do active stuff,
Mm,
because most of them, in order to get here, they have to have been able to have some kind of level of success in their life, right? And it kind of speaks to almost like them almost feeling like this isn't the right wording, but losing their edge. But what I would like to call it much raw is kind of like losing your aliveness, your energy, right? That kind
Mm.
of, this sounds like, I don't know why I'm using all the mystical words today, but it's almost like using like losing that life force, which is something that I know that when we were living together, so me and Karen used to live together for about year and a half, 2 years in Budapest. We were part of the same company. We got mentored by the same person, live in mentorship, basically. Like, I don't know who else really has gone through that kind of level of apprenticeship in this kind of thing because it was really, really super intense. We were all living together. We were running the same company. We have a bunch of fun stories from this time period, but from this specific part of this time period when we were living, believe it was in Budapest, we were meditating 3 hours a day, 1.5 hours in the morning, 1.5 hours in the evening. On Saturdays, big Saturday night out, we do a 3 hour sit in the afternoon, which was always it was always very discombobulating to look at the time. It would be like 2 p.m. And then I would say to Cameron, see you at 5 p.m. And then we'd meditate for 3 hours, right? So,
Yeah.
and then doing constant, we didn't have access to the shadow work that we have right now, but what we did have access to was quite comprehensive models, not fully comprehensive though, but quite comprehensive models of hypnotherapy, advanced conversational hypnotherapy being one of them, hypnosis without trance being another one from James Tripp. And so it was all very heavy introspection. We had all of this beautiful new I don't know if awareness is the right word, but maybe different consciousnesses coming up. Basically, just if you look at the stages model, developmental psychology, we were going really deep and maturing really quickly into a new stage. It was really, really cool. But from what was happening for me, is I definitely felt like I had lost a little bit of that clarity of drive, of aliveness,
Yeah.
of living, right, that I had when I
Mm.
was how I was beforehand, right? And that
Yeah.
actually affected how I felt in life. It's funny because I didn't feel like I would have wanted to go back because I definitely wouldn't because there's a lot of stress that was arising for me then. But it felt like there
Mm.
was something missing. Like I would be a bit more passive. I would question myself a bit
Yeah.
more. I wouldn't allow myself to fully connect in the moment. And it wasn't even like allowing yourself isn't even the right wording. I'd be interested to get your experience of this as well, Cameron. But it was more like there was just a certain amount of detachment because of this theme that I've been
Yeah.
seeing, both with this client, but also with other clients, how there's almost like a not allowing yourself to fully go into the aliveness of the world. And how that translates really is exactly like in this example that we started off with, is disengagement. Because one of the big things that people who are going through this, and for this client in particular, we'll call him Tim, right? Tim. It causes disengagement. He felt disengaged. He's feeling more disengaged in relationships, friendships, even going to whatever he finds cool, all of this kind of stuff, right? If it creates all of this disengagement, then I would say this is a practice which needs some refinement or it needs some integration, basically.
Yeah.
And my own journey, what changed from moving from A to B, is I realized that even though this new consciousness and this new part of me was a bit wiser, actually, it doesn't mean that he was infallible,
Mm.
right? Just because this might be the wisest stage that's arising for me right now, the most mature stage arising for me right now, that says, hey, let's take a breath. Let's feel into that.
Yeah.
Let's actually see the nuance of this situation rather than just seeing things black and white binary. That's an amazing part of me. But it's when you're able to turn the introspection back on itself, even from the point of realizing that even though this part is very wise, I shouldn't be having any golden projections on this anyway. You
Yeah.
know, like there's nothing inherently like I shouldn't be taking this word as gospel
Mm. Yeah.
because maybe it is better than before, but if it's taking away like my actual enjoyment and fulfillment in life, then clearly there's some things to kind of reorganize. And what changed that for me was not putting things was well exactly like I said, like not having the golden projection, realizing I was golden projecting on what this thing that was coming up. So in the example we're talking about here, the golden projection would be, or the pedestalizing behavior would be, oh, it doesn't matter anyway. Well, cool,
Yeah,
but what does that mean? Like that doesn't mean anything. Like doesn't stop me from doing anything, basically. That's what really allowed me to pierce through this specific kind of problem. And once I did, I had so much more energy. I was able to, I mean, thank God as well, because I was just starting my business at the time. Can you imagine if I was just starting my business without having pierced this through? It would have been so much harder because I had so much more direction, was able to work much more, do outreach, do all of the boring tasks. I didn't view them as boring either. I just did them. Again, this is part of letting this go too. Because when you're having fulfillment, enjoyment, happiness, whatever it is, when you're doing something, you have more energy to do that thing.
yeah,
But what was it
yeah.
like for you?
Well, what emerged for me was when I'm just hearing you speak, and especially at that point in our life when we were both at that stage, but also our practice, while it was fairly integral with hypnotherapy,
Yeah,
it was that basis in meditation that really almost pedestalized, I don't know how to say that word, nothingness, right?
yeah,
And how long we would sit for 3 hours in nothingness, which was seems a
yeah.
really deep state. And it was. I mean, I experienced so much stability
For people
in
just
my experience. Yeah, go on.
maybe wondering what nothingness is, what you can think of it as it's like a real deep state of equanimity or being at peace, but it's like a
Yeah,
state. So it's not just
yeah,
being that, it's like an actual state that you put yourself into. So it's slightly different from the emotion of being at peace because the state, we make it ourselves. And in some ways, it's much stronger, isn't it? Like a
yeah,
state
yeah,
versus a feeling. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And within that stability, like I felt extremely powerful in many ways. But like you said,
yeah,
there was something that was missing. And
yeah,
I think because the practice was a little bit of a blanket statement, it was
yeah,
like blanket nothingness to everything, and
mhm,
then doing kind of hypnotherapy and stuff around the edges. But
yeah,
that was more of a supplement to the core practice.
yeah.
And I don't know about you, but what I experienced was when I let that go, it was a little bit challenging because my
Oh, yeah,
daily
so
state
challenging.
was like drops. You
Yeah,
know, I went from like my daily
yeah,
state being a 9 out of 10. Now,
yeah.
when I say 9 out of 10, it's like it was extremely stable and very peaceful, but it wasn't integrating and emerging in life like my experience is now.
Would
But
you
what
say
it
that's be
going?
would you say, because I want to really expand on that because I'm really interested to hear your experience. Would you say that's because even though it's a really high level meditation technology, because of the way that we were using it, it was a bit more top down than bottom up?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's like a top-down blanket. Like everything
yeah,
is within nothingness,
yeah,
and that's it.
yeah,
You know, it all doesn't matter,
yeah,
right? And that's
yeah,
true, but then what about all the aliveness that might want to emerge, right? What about all
yeah,
the beautiful complexity? And so when you
yeah,
put that blanket, you do get lots of great results, and your mind becomes incredibly still. You're able to be in an amazing state all day,
yeah.
but you miss out on a lot of that aliveness, a lot of what it could be,
You
a lot
miss
of what it could
out,
evolve into.
ironically, you miss out on the highs and the lows.
Yeah,
Like the lows
yeah,
are actually something to miss out on if you
yeah,
have equanimity to being in a low state, which is true equanimity,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It's like you get more of a, as you move into the next path that we're speaking about, You get
Yeah.
more of an equanimity to states as well, rather
Yeah.
than being in this state of equanimity,
Yeah.
which is
Exactly.
a tricky thing to comprehend, and
Yeah.
certainly took me a while to figure that one out.
Yeah.
But I mean, God, the dip from doing that every day to like, all right, well, clearly this isn't the end. Shadow work's super important, and this wider view of
Yeah.
working with the mind is super important. I'm gonna
Yeah.
leave this aside for a little bit. My experience was way more chaotic, way more challenging. But then what I've noticed is, whereas before it used to be a lot more up and down, when I was in that nothingness, it was like what I was grasping to,
Mm.
I was good, we're all good, we're all good.
Yeah.
But if I was out of it in the chaos of life, hadn't done my 1 hour, 2 hour sit, right, or been a little bit shaky recently,
Mm.
I was a lot more fragile,
Yeah.
right?
Because you're still
And
relying on something
yeah, it
external,
was
right?
like literally like, please, nothing that's come back to me. Where has it gone? Like, it was
Yeah.
terrifying if it wasn't there because it was your only crutch. Whereas now, and I don't know if it's the same for you, I'm sure it is. This is more of a underlying, I'm okay, an underlying equanimity
Mm.
that is almost beyond the state of equanimity.
Yeah.
Even when there's states of anxiety or states of frustration, anger, the underlying is in equanimity and peace. Whereas it was probably the opposite before.
Yeah. Can I get your thoughts on how, because for those of you that don't know, me and Cameron, obviously we're different people, but Cameron was always someone who struggled a bit more when it came to, how do I say this, like being reactive to his own states. Whereas for me, I struggled
Mm,
a lot more. Let me know if you think this is fair or not, with managing other people's pressure onto me, basically. Because
right.
that's how,
Yeah.
that's what, just what whatever happened, we happen to be more reactive to, basically. So I was more kind of in touch with how other people were feeling, and that would rub off onto me. And that was one of the things I had to work on, which is a whole other topic we can go into. But seeing as we're on this topic now, you just talked about how you've let go of the safety blanket, right? Of the state of equanimity, which we learn a lot of good lessons, right? From.
Yeah.
But once that safety blanket was left, what I think would be really interesting to go into was how you actually, the process of, because one of your biggest growth factors that I've ever seen from you was when you kind of let go of, I have to control my state. And it seemed like this is
Mm,
the kind of the time it happened. And I think this would be useful for people, especially, I mean, people who are listening on my side, always people who are listening on your side, because people still have, one of the big problems that I still see with people is just an overall reactivity to how they're feeling or how their day's
yeah.
going or how other people are feeling
Yeah.
around them. So maybe if we get a little bit more of
Mm,
your journey about how, now the safety blanket's off, how is it that you, instead of falling back into the old worldview, you were actually able to transcend and include and go to the next evolution, and you didn't kind of flail
yeah.
around like so many people did?
Mm. I suppose the biggest insight that emerged for me was seeing that I was creating a hierarchy of states that meant something more than it was just a nice state.
Yeah.
When I was in a really blissful state, what that was being internalized as, the meaning making that I was creating was, I'm doing really good.
Mm.
I'm on the right path.
Okay.
Everything is okay now.
Yeah.
Like this meta okayness, this meta, I'm doing good. And then if there was a bad state, it's like, oh, I'm doing bad.
Yeah.
Oh, something's wrong. Something bad is about to happen. So there
Mhm.
was this meaning that was coming off it, but I didn't realize at the time. I just was very attached to the state experience. But
Mhm.
it was really about what it meant for me. When I was on the path or I wasn't. When I was doing really good or I was doing really bad. And it was kind of this internal judgment, almost like a 3.5 judgment,
Wow.
right? Of trying to put it all within this good, bad, doing well, doing badly, right? It was and my identity. And so when that broke, when that meaning making stopped arising, the states stopped being compared in this way, and were just, floating around being states,
Yeah.
like just as they are, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I'm curious to hear what your experience was like with almost the external version of that. But I
Mm,
imagine the people who are listening to this and are exploring this, it's more to do with how we're relating to the states. What is it that that state being good means? That blissful state, but what is it that's creating that attachment or that craving?
mm.
I know that
Yeah.
curiosity of me finding out that meaning making was what broke
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
and kind of liberated that real attachment, but was very frustrating at times.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that comes up for me when you say that is actually the example I have. Long-time client, still working with him. Before we worked together, he'd already done so much work, like shadow work and reparenting, all of these high-level protocols before we came and did work together. I talked about him a bit before, maybe. Used to be in financial technology, was able to not
Mm,
work for a couple of years and still pay for all this kind of coaching and all that kind of stuff. So already had done pretty well, but as you can see, the kind of classic example of somebody who moved from that making money, just being successful, like just being successful in this narrow definition of what success is, done pretty well in that world, to now moving into this next world is a blind spot which I unfortunately see a lot of the time in this world, in this space that me and you are in shadow work, and maybe you have a different opinion, right? Is there's still so much reactivity in the internal states, which is why I wanted to get your thoughts on how you were able to overcome that, because people don't know Cameron right now, but the difference in the reactivity of how he was when we first met versus now is night and day, right?
mm,
That's why I thought the force he just shared were really, really valuable, because so much stuff, if you're not careful, it reinforces like that underlying. It's almost like a bias we already have when we go into that worldview, because we've just come out of a worldview where the internal is just a means to an end. Oh, feeling tired? Just take a cold shower, right? Need to get more energy? Go for a 5K run. All that kind of stuff. I mean, and let's be clear, none of this stuff is bad. Please do it. But there's almost like a finality to it. Like we just do that. But now what's opening up is, oh, you start to realize there's so many different opinions. It's like a symphony inside of you, an ecology, an ecosystem, right? More than, let's say, a computer program, definitely not a computer program. Whereas actually the stages before might refer to as a computer program. Now we're seeing that it's an internal community, it's an orchestra, it's a live ecology. So we already have this little bit of an overcorrection where all of this is so valuable, and it is, but not to the point where if you don't feel like doing something, then you don't do it, which is what we mean by state reactivity. So with this guy that I'm still working with, and what he was able to overcome is he went from exploring like every little detail of what was coming up to being able to prioritize it in a in a way which doesn't suppress or push any of it down or away, while still being able to do what he needs to do. And
mm.
the results speak for them, or his journey speaks for himself. He went from not doing anything, just gone back to living with his parents, not because he really had to, but because he just didn't want to do anything. Comes back to that nihilism, right? Like, doesn't matter anyway, right?
Yeah,
To now living abroad alone in the place that he wants to, running the business that he wants to. That can be
yeah,
the difference between not into between having a state, like being reactive to states and investigating everything, to still giving everything internal the value that it deserves, whilst it's not being the dictator, and you are actually the prime minister or the president, like a strong prime minister
yeah,
and a president.
yeah.
That's what came up for
It's,
me.
I'm also curious because You used the word orchestra and symphony,
Yeah,
and I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts there, because I think that's such a great way of viewing it, and such
yeah,
a insight of the difference, of course, from that computer program, but even from internal community where everyone kind of you're trying to listen to everyone and you're reactive
yeah,
to everyone.
yeah,
So the orchestra, where there's almost the beauty of it emerging and there's not much of a reactivity.
yeah,
And I'm curious if you've got anything arising for you around that wording. So I just thought it was really,
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, that's really good. You pointed that out. It's like if you're the conductor, you're responding to everyone in your orchestra, but you're not reactive to it, right?
Yeah.
So maybe what some people are falling into right now is being reactive to, like, imagine a conductor was reactive to every note a violin played, or the percussion played, or the flute played, right? Rather than actually taking a step back, looking at the picture as a whole, and then adding different, brush strokes or acupuncture points to guide the orchestra where it needs to go. That's what our job here is. It's not to be a dictator, like we're not micromanaging everyone to play the right note. We
Yeah.
said, now it's your turn. This is what they do, by the way. They like, for those of you that are listening, I used to sing in a choir. I used to be the lead singer actually
Wow.
of my childhood choir until my voice broke and I got kicked to the curb at the end of year six,
Brutal.
basically. Yeah. And the orchestra, they keep they keep the beats by doing this, like they do like an L shape with their motion. They go one and two and three and four, something like that. So you're keeping the beat, you're keeping everything going, and then in the offhand, you're pointing at different when it's different people's parts to play, and you're telling them to go off when it's time for them to go off. That's the kind of, if you can imagine a high level conductor, right? How you just hear, and I'm not sure if anyone's ever listened to classical music or even just been, sometimes they had them in plays in England where me and Cameron are from. It's a big kind of play, pantomime, theatre kind of culture, at least in London. And you can see a live orchestra a lot of the time goes along with these kind of plays. Someone who's an amazing conductor, everything just flows naturally. There's no friction in the orchestra. There's no resistance in the orchestra. It just, like magic, it just plays. And some of these orchestras have like almost 100 people in them, or like a few dozen people in them, and that's a lot of people to manage, and yet it happens effortlessly. Our internal world is a lot like that. If it's, in fact, it's actually even more complex. But luckily, we are also a lot more complex too. So we have the resources to rise to that challenge. But if you've ever listened to somebody who's maybe not such a good conductor, they don't give each section space enough to breathe and really flow, or they do it too much. And then some people start playing off beat, and then all of this kind of stuff starts to happen. And as a last point, there are some, like, if like depending on what piece you're playing, I guess, there's like a bass. And that you could say is the thing that leads the whole piece, because without the bass, there's nothing to build on. However, you wouldn't call that bass a dictator, you
Mm,
know? But some of us, we get confused that, yes, whilst there is something which is driving this, that doesn't then give that part or that piece of us an opportunity or an excuse to be a dictator.
yeah.
Like, you would never say, oh, because the bass is the thing that everything builds on in this piece, they're the ones that call all the shots and they get all of the big bucks. No,
Yeah.
because it's, whilst there is a hierarchy, it's irrelevant when it comes to value. That's
Mm,
what kind of it comes up to me when I use the word orchestra, because it just gives so many different distinctions, and we don't get lost in different parts or saying, oh, but this one deserves to be the leader, or this one doesn't deserve to get listened to.
yeah. I love that. And what was arising for me is specifically when you were just noticing that the conductor isn't squashing a segment, but they're also not going so far away that
Yeah.
they're not managing it at all.
That's the problem we just
And
were talking about, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Of like just letting it flow, but some some parts of us aren't ready to flow yet. You know, some
Yeah. It's
parts are
quite
a little
humbling,
bit
isn't it?
immature. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But then the opposite was true, and I was just writing about this morning, of some parts are ready to flow beyond us.
Mm.
And especially what I really love in the ESR system by Kim, of when you let the light emerge, not putting anything in there, but just letting the light emerge. I'm sure you've experienced this, but there's multiple times where that light, that new consciousness, was wiser than me, or the me that I was identifying with at the time. And it would grow way bigger, way wiser, and would start sharing and teaching with me until eventually it became more, it almost became the conductor itself.
Wow. Yeah.
And this is such a wonderful metaphor
Yeah.
of it, that I remember I was actually in Budapest at a classical musical concert, and you've got the conductor, and he was a older guy, had this real wisdom. But then you
Yeah.
would watch the players, like the violin, the cello, and I think there was one cello guy, and he seemed like he was a little bit of a leader within the orchestra,
Yeah.
because when people were kind of, you know how you can just tell, like, he had this real energy about him. And you kind of felt, through my complete lack of understanding around conducting an orchestra, that
Yeah.
he had an extra space to flourish and thrive and,
Yeah.
go off in his own way,
Yeah.
compared to maybe the younger people in the orchestra who were still talented and skilled, but
Yeah.
needed a little bit more support and
Maturity.
management.
Yeah.
Yeah, maturity. And so sometimes letting that fellow player, right, letting that
Mm.
light really shine beyond you and being humble within that, that, oh, you're bigger than me.
Yeah.
And then it's creates such a massive shift in consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's been
Yeah.
some of the biggest insights that I've had.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can relate to that. I'm
Yeah.
sure you can.
Actually, as you were saying that story, it made me think of kind of a great client I have. One of the kind of poster boys of like, if you were really into states, this guy what is like not into states, but definitely into whatever's coming up for him feeling wise, or he was when we began, right? So
Mm.
this would be like, imagine watching an orchestra without a conductor. That's what this guy was like,
Right.
and it was kind of up to the orchestra itself to lead itself, basically.
Mm.
And I'm sure if you've ever been to like a jam session where people are just riffing, there's some great parts of it, you know? Like, although he was like this, this person is a fully qualified medical doctor. You don't get that by accident, especially in today's world.
Mm.
Um, that's like a really rigorous study period. I think it's like 5 years or something until you're like fully, or like it has to be at least 5 years of study or something like that. And obviously practical working on not on site. That sounds like a builder. What is it called? Like it's called like you
um,
have to work in dorms, or if you have to work on the hospital, or obviously
yeah,
that's part
I
of
know
it
what you
before
mean.
you
I
even
forgot
get
what
to be
it's
a
called.
doctor. Yeah, so like he was a fully qualified medical doctor, but his problem, like I said, is he didn't have a conductor. And this is something which at each stage is like peeling an onion, gets deeper and deeper each time. But there's almost like a limit, like you can go as deep, and then your experience and your maturity has to catch up of actually like lived in
Mm.
embodied practice, and then you can go deeper. So, guys, don't worry if things are taking a bit longer. Some people, for whatever reason, in certain areas, they're just ready to have a massive breakthrough. Boom, like that. And it's completely transformative. They no longer have this problem. But what happens more often than not is we're peeling back an onion. And each layer of an onion is a transformation because you would go from, in this example, not having a conductor at all to having a beginner conductor. That's like indescribable change. And what that looked like for this client, um, I'm running out of names. Oh my God. What should we
Jerry.
say? Jerry or Terry. We'll say Jerry for this one. Yeah, that's such a weird name, isn't it? Sorry, guys. The naming's not my strongest suit, but we'll call him Jerry. What a funny name. Yeah, so this guy was so what that looked like at the start was being completely almost a slave to what was happening inside of him, despite obviously still being able to work a bit. Like I said, fully qualified medical doctor. It went from that to then being able to say no and yes to things more easy. Now, what that means in practice is he was able to say no to a relationship that wasn't working for him and leave that and be okay with that. And then find a new relationship now, who he's still with, by the way, at the moment, who's much, much more compatible with him because he's able to now have boundaries, right? In this kind of
Yeah.
way. And now if we fast forward to today, now he has a very, very competent conductor where he's able, before it was very hard for him to take criticism from like a close friend because he would take it so personally. Now
Mm.
he runs his own business with one of his best friends, also in the kind of hypnotherapy therapy space. Very successful business, obviously, has a good background for that in medicine, all that kind of stuff, and then integrated all of the mental health hypnotherapy, all that kind of stuff. Now he's able to have really, really tough business conversations with his friend without it ruining their relationship because he doesn't take it personal anymore. He's able to
Right.
hold space with clients. Before, he used to have a really hard time with following up with people and structuring things because he wanted to just live life in the flow and be like a bit more of a flow boy. Let's put it like that, right?
Mm.
Now he's able to actually integrate all of the good business practices. Still has a few, you know, hiccups there and here and there. So need to make sure that's clear as well. But overall, is able to be a very, very effective person in these spaces where he wasn't able to do anything at all before. And the other one is accountability too. This is what having a good conductor does to your internal system. And remember, we are that
Yeah.
conductor. We can ask for help, but just as a last point, because I'd love to get your thoughts on what's coming up for you. A last point is a lot of the time people or a pattern I've seen is people think that the conductor's still going to come from the external. It's like it's something that's going to happen to them. No, it's up to us to take that responsibility and accountability,
Yeah.
which means we have to be okay with getting things wrong every once in a while, which is actually another big breakthrough that this Jerry had, right? Was that was okay. If he makes a mistake, and maybe that mistake affects other people, because remember, he's running a business and it's not just him in the business, then yeah, he might take a bit of flack for that, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all good in the end. Rather than if you didn't have the conductor, it would be like somebody hits you with an emotional, like, why did you do that? And then you get all of that feeling of resentment or whatever comes up. And then instead of just responding to that, you get reactive to that. And now suddenly that's in your system for like a day, a couple of days, which
Yeah.
obviously isn't a good experience of life. But I'm sure that you have very
Interesting.
similar. Oh, please, yeah.
Yeah, I do have a curiosity of what were the breakthroughs or what did the process look like to really allow that conductor to emerge and then also allow that, it's okay to make mistakes
Yeah.
emerge too. I'm curious
Yeah.
how that looked.
Well, how it looks in session is I'm sure Cameron works the same way as well. Obviously, correct me if I'm wrong. Is you're never top down in these ideas. You're never telling them this is what's happening, right? You're letting them explore what's coming up. The reason they're coming to you to begin with is they know there's something off, but and this is for everyone, right? It's not like just happens for our clients. This is for almost everyone, unless you get to a really high. When you start getting to a really high kind of developmental or very, very mature level, you can kind of see storylines as they come up and not engage in them. But until you get to this very specific skill set, because it is a bit of a very specific skill set, like you don't get this just overnight. People kind of know what's happening, but they don't really. Because if you knew what was happening, you'd be able to overcome this problem. Because problems are rooted in ignorance more often than, well, they are just rooted in ignorance, like certain assumptions, like very reductionistic thinking, this kind of way. So for like the example of being able to take criticism, because that's the thing that I remember that you said. Well, what was coming up is over a couple of sessions or over a time period, he was able to see that that like whenever he would receive criticism, it would really shake the boat, so to speak. So what's actually important is giving somebody the space to explore that whilst adding direction, just like a conductor. Oh, okay, this is the symptom, but what is a specific trigger for this? Like, for example, it triggers you in this way, but when somebody leaves an anonymous comment or somebody who you don't really think too highly of, not that you don't think highly of them, but just they're a neutral person, that doesn't affect you in the same way. So I wonder what's specifically happening here that's making this a big deal. So is that kind of a direction without me adding any conclusions? If somebody starts adding conclusions in this kind of shadow work or leading top down answers, and this is in very specific circumstances, the circumstances would be somebody just isn't able to have any resources at all, in which case you kind of have to drip feed a bit of resources to somebody, like somebody who's really stuck, basically. If people exploring and coming to the conclusion themselves is so much more powerful, so much more empowering. It would be like giving somebody the athletic talent of Michael Jordan instantly without giving them the storyline and the hardships that Michael Jordan had to go through in order to achieve that talent. So yes, they would do pretty well, but one-on-one against the Michael Jordan, they get destroyed every single time
Mm.
because because they got given something rather than them having to work through it. So they missed out so many different lessons in order to get to that peak. It's the same when it comes to this. It's allowing people to find their own lessons whilst not letting them go too crazy. Because if they go a bit too much into
Mm.
symptoms, then you're not doing your job properly. If they just keep
Yeah.
on lamenting, if they're staying in trigger, even if they're staying in mental process aware, you have to give them the space and the direction at once. So for him, if I remember correctly, the big part of it was realizing that this was a theme and then seeing, well, where did I learn that criticism should be interpreted this way? Where did I learn that I had to react in this kind of way? How did I learn that? When
Mm.
somebody's born as a baby, they don't have any meaning around criticism. If somebody shouts at the baby is just going to start crying because somebody's shouting and angry. But there's no meaning making around that. It's just, oh, anger, I'm vulnerable. Like not even I'm vulnerable, just like, oh, there's somebody angry around me. I don't know how to react. So I cry because I don't have the mechanisms to deal with that. But there's no like comprehensive storyline like, oh, this person shouted at me, therefore I must be a bad person. Doesn't even have a concept of what a person is. So at some point that had to have come out, and then we uncovered it, got to the core wound. And like so many times with core wounds, Cameron can attest to this, you heal it. And not only does that issue go, but so many other issues that you didn't even talk about also change. So in his example, it was being able to stand in his own opinion more and just having a bit more density and groundedness in his energy, which was really needed because he was, like I said, almost like the quintessential person who pluralist green stage person who gets into this kind of shadow work and get stuck there, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does that spark any memories, or not memories for you, but any examples for you, maybe in your life, or
Yeah.
people that you've worked
Well,
with that had similar journeys?
there's a few, but also I wanted to touch on something that you shared as you were speaking.
Yeah.
And you're kind of speaking about that emergence of, the conductor initially being just not a very good conductor and then
Yeah.
coming into a really powerful conductor. And that emergence over time of bit by bit by bit.
Hmm.
And the reason that kind of sparked something is literally on my way here, I was thinking about how each of the types of shadow work and even beyond shadow work are kind of intermingling together. And I was really noticing that with clients, but even with myself, there'll be really big breakthroughs. But I find specifically with ESR, when you do some big systematic giveaway, something completely new emerges. And it
ESR
can create a
is
really dynamic
evolution of shadow
shift.
resolution, by the way, guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But then I found that ACH, which we were speaking about earlier, advanced conversational hypnotherapy from
Yeah.
Scott Jansen, is perfect for the kind of little strands at the end. You know, when you've
Yeah.
got like 90% of the breakthrough, where
Yeah.
it's like, that doesn't even make sense. Why am I saying it? You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're the whole part of you, like 90% of you is completely on board with the new reality, but 10% is just saying dumb stuff in the background. And I'm
Yeah.
like, shut up. And he's like, no. I'm like, shut up, bro. He's like,
Yeah.
no. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let me just ask you a curious question.
Yeah.
What do you really think? He's like, I don't know. Okay, yeah, yeah, you're right. And
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
thing happens.
Yeah. There's almost like always a stubborn, there's sometimes, well, not always, but sometimes there's a stubborn part which just wants to be listened to and just wants to be
Yeah.
heard, right?
It just
Yeah.
it just wants to say something. Sometimes like me, sometimes I'm just a stubborn part in
Yeah.
life of I just want to talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Exactly.
happens.
Yeah.
But that's what it kind of made me think about is using each system for the right purpose. And then this other system that I really love, which was given to me by Pierre, and I think he got it from I literally don't know how he created it, but it came
Yeah.
from somewhere, which he calls the self-liberation practice, which is a wonderful way to allow essentially consciousness to liberate on its own.
Mm.
And that's just amazing for just getting unstuck when you're a little bit in that shadow work fix it place where you want to move on to the next shadow and break through that construct and break through this.
Mhm.
This kind of brings in that tone of it's naturally self-liberating.
Yeah.
And I suppose what my curiosity was is when you're viewing the systems of shadow work that you use, how does that arise for you? I mean, how are you thinking about it when you're working with Jerry or yourself or in general?
Yeah. I think the term consciousness self-liberates is a really good way of describing it, actually. Like we have some direction. We're trying to get to the core wound. In order to get to the core wound, you have to go through some more symptom stages, some more trigger stages, some more mental processing stages to get to the core wound. But it's very important that unless you're working with a very specific type of client or very specific type of stuckness, and for those listening, when you're working on your own, that we don't want to let direction turn into dictation. The direction just points us in the right way. This is for all practice. This is for a lot of practices too, like getting better at stuff. But the moment we're really trying to force ourselves to move through, maybe we just want to stay a bit more lighter level, just process everything there. And then once just enough has been processed, it naturally moves to the next one. The problem emerges when we've been there for like 10 years, when
Mm,
we're like overdoing it, basically. But if you're really sensitive and if you really pay attention, this requires more. sensitivity, which is why if you can get a mentor who can do this for you, it's just so much better. You can kind of feel when you've just processed enough, like just enough, that your consciousness now is, instead of you pushing it, is pushing you to explore the next deeper stage. And you can feel that in clients. I'm sure Cameron can feel that in clients too, where it's like, okay, he's kind of said everything he needs to say at this kind of stage. And actually, his consciousness, how do I see his consciousness? Through his words or through this person's words and through their reactions and body language and all that kind of stuff. But it's also like a felt sense too, which is you're doing now all of that is pointing me like enough of stuff has been processed here because enough of his consciousness is now naturally moving in that direction anyway. It just might need a bit of a nudge or a bit more of a funnel because we don't
Mm.
always know what the deeper level is. It's just we know he wants to move to a deeper stage. That's how I would describe doing it, basically. What about for you?
Yeah, I love that. Especially just like seeing it more as it just wants to.
Yeah,
Like it just wants to come into light,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. There's
Let's
no
just get out of the way
resistance.
and help it do that. Which
Yeah,
also is not helpful advice. Just
nah.
get out of the way, bro. Just let go. Yeah, I'm
Just
sure
be
you've tried that
yourself.
before.
It's
Yeah,
basically
just
what
be
it's like.
confident, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
just be present. Yeah,
yeah,
thanks, bro.
yeah.
I've never thought of that before.
So how do
But
we then make this a bit more practical for people and
wow,
actionable for people?
that's a
So
good
at the end,
question.
like if we were to take it a bit more seriously, obviously, if you can get somebody who understands this, great. If you're having a crack at it on your own, maybe I can start, is there's almost always a sense of however you're working with shadow, when you're ready to move to the next stage of getting to the core wound, um, in the evolution of shadow resolution, which again, if you don't know this, it's tough to get to the core wound on its own, just like it just is, basically. Before we integrated this, getting to the core wound was a much more on or off kind of thing for us, right? But how you can measure that is you pay attention to the curiosity that's emerging in the moment. Is the curiosity to maybe process a bit more and understand a bit more at this current stage? Or is the curiosity gently shifting to, I kind of understood enough at this stage, but it still feels like it's not resolved. That it still feels like it's not resolved, that's pointing you to the next stage, which is a deeper level of understanding, like triggers, how your mind is processing something, then core conceptualization, all that kind of stuff. That's what I would say for somebody. Like it's getting really, really intentional with your awareness of whatever the internal shadow is that you're working with and seeing, is the curiosity pointing to the next level of depth, or is it still so much curiosity about this current stage that I'm at? With, if I had to put a, how do I say this? If I had to put benefit of the doubt on one side, I'd always say benefit on the doubt of moving to the next stage, because otherwise it's so easy to get caught in symptoms and stuff like that, because most people do, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also, I love the question there of how am I generating this?
yeah,
And that's just such a beautiful question to go from symptom and trigger, like you said, where a lot of people are, and they're trying to heal it. I want to heal the anxiety, but keep healing the anxiety, and it goes for a bit, then it comes back. It's like, well, how am I
yeah,
generating this? What
yeah,
is it about? I remember you were telling that story with the client we were calling Jerry of being really specific. You don't get triggered at this thing. So this isn't a trigger. This isn't a trigger, even though it's kind of similar to this. What is it about this that's generating this symptom?
hmm,
And that curiosity there, specificity. that really leads you to that internal process of how we are creating our reality.
Hmm.
And even if you don't go to conscious conceptualization, which is the next level, you can do so much internal process. And it I don't know about you, but just operating from understanding internal process often breaks triggers and symptoms on its own. Just seeing that, oh, I'm just generating this from this. Huh. Well, then this is unnecessary and this is kind of unnecessary. And then even if you're just staying here, just being curious about this, sometimes just curiosity is so powerful to break it.
Hmm.
And if we get an example, I had a client and they were really struggling with the situation in a relationship. And it was it was very small, but they basically didn't say something they wanted to say.
Hmm.
Right. But then what was emerging was a real criticalness of himself. Like, what is wrong with you? Why did you do that?
Hmm.
And so I was wondering, I'm like, so this situation happened and you didn't say this. What is it about not saying that in this situation that's creating this really critical voice and this real, almost self-hatred? And what arose was, oh, it's my fault and I'm bad. And I'm like, huh, interesting.
Hmm.
And then we just get curious without even going into conscious conceptualization. We did a bit, but just to the internal process of it's my fault and I'm bad. Like, that's interesting. What are we talking about? You're bad? And even just saying it in that way,
Yeah.
which you have a really cheeky way of saying things like this when you do it. You say it in such a way where I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I'm not bad. And I love it. Um, and suddenly they're like, oh, am I bad? And they move from being in that moment of,
Yeah.
yeah, I am bad to, am I bad?
Yeah.
Is it my fault?
Yeah.
And then you just see it's almost like these cogs just breaking in the mind of,
Yeah.
oh, maybe me not saying something for whatever reason, because maybe I was a little bit nervous,
Mm.
or maybe I didn't say it. Maybe that's not because I'm bad.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just I didn't say something.
Yeah.
And then there's this separation where this trigger and the symptom no longer lives in the same internal process.
Yeah.
And then we get really curious, and it's like that shadow tree of as this breaks, what else breaks with it?
Mm.
What else was I living with? What I was interpreting as I'm bad?
Yeah.
And it's so crazy how much that can feed into.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but it's always fun seeing clients. You have something with, like, I don't know, a relationship, and then suddenly they're having crazy breakthroughs in something completely separate, like hanging out on their football team or something,
Yeah.
completely random. And they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, it's amazing! I'm basically messy now." I'm like, "All right, cool. I don't know how that relates, but sure." Like they
Yeah.
just have crazy breakthroughs in
Yeah.
all areas.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm curious if anything arises for you around that.
No, I was just saying that the thing that you brought up is like a really basically the definition of a pattern interrupt, where someone's like just at the moment where they're about to make a storyline out of something, and you're like, is it? And then they're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah. So we can go into all this depth, guys, but at the end of the day, it can be that simple, you know?
Yeah.
If you arrive at the moment, again, this requires a lot of awareness, which is why until you get to that kind of stage, it is easier for just to have somebody else there with you, working you through it like a coach or a mentor. But if you arrive just at the moment before the storyline forms or as the storyline is forming, it's almost like you can knock the legs out from under it before the legs have even come up, basically. And if you get really good at doing that, then you can start to do this in your day-to-day life too, which is just before
Mm.
you, it's almost like there's an end exactly. It's almost like there's an energy which is of solidity, which is kind of you're opting into. Like, oh, like let's say,
Mm,
I don't know, like what would be like a really silly example? Like you say hi to somebody on a walk and they don't say hi back, right? And like, you know, I just say, oh, it's because everyone hates me, like all this kind of stuff. Like, it's because everyone hates me. And then you're like, wait, there's almost like a moment of gravitational pull where you can fully go into that, and then suddenly, boom, the storyline is birthed, right? Or you
mm,
say, does it mean that? Or does it just mean somebody didn't say hi to me when I didn't say hi back? Which, by the way, doesn't mean anything. It's just an event that happened, right? And then,
yeah.
oh, wait, yeah. And then you can liberate yourself from it. But if you have a propensity to make certain things of a certain situation, like whether it's around being more extroverted, like in this example, if you're more often than not creating a storyline which is people don't like me, it's probably because there's a core wound which almost acts as like a black hole, which like sucks in information that can feed that narrative, in which case you'd have to go and do really kind of pointed shadow work. That's what's coming up for me. Is there anything else coming up for you, sir?
I suppose just finishing on that note of it can be that real mixture of sometimes when you've really healed the shadow underneath and that have a conscious conceptualization stage, like you said, that was that black hole and that's healed, and so much shifts from that. But sometimes it can be really great when that's shifted to literally just be questioning things around it.
Mm,
And it's almost like things fall in line.
yeah.
It's almost like the wiring at the edge just
Hmm.
had to be questioned a little bit and it
Yeah.
just breaks,
Yeah.
which is really cool to see. Because I've noticed with when we're doing this work, right, I'm referring to more of a evolution of shadow resolution, and we're going to the core and we're coming, allowing that to grow, the light to grow into the symptom. Often that can be very somatic, not always, it can be cognitive too. But sometimes it's really useful, especially if it did emerge somatically, like it just
Hmm.
emerged as a beautiful piece or a beautiful wholeness, right? Let's say you use the example of you're on the street, someone doesn't say hi, oh, everyone hates me. Let's say you took that on as a felt belief
Yeah.
when you were younger, everyone hates me. And when you just come into that real wholeness, maybe a
Yeah.
belonging,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just in real belonging. But then you still notice that while you're in that wholeness and belonging, just for like minor tone of a thought arises of maybe they hate me.
Mm,
And it can be really tempting to go, oh, does that mean I didn't heal?
yeah.
No, it's just the core is there. But if you just ask, is that true? Very often, it's almost like
Yeah.
because the breakthrough is 90% there, the twigs at the edge of the tree or the leaves
Yeah.
just needed a bit of reminder that we've already done this.
Yeah.
This is what it is. It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in wholeness and belonging. Like
Exactly.
sometimes it can just do that somatic breakthrough and then just play with it a little bit cognitively.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say.
Amazing. Yeah. That's a
And
really
that'll be
cool
a good place
practice.
to finish.
For sure. It's almost like the door to change is open. Sometimes that can be a small change, but maybe we can stay there a little bit longer with that curiosity and see if it's actually a liberation of all of this. You know, it just depends on whatever's coming up for you. If you want a bit more guidance on that, I have a free product, the most practical guide to shadow work on the internet. It's got everything I know about shadow work and got some developmental psychology woven in there. Obviously, my background in Theravada Buddhism, all together in a comprehensive system to help you, not just to help you, not just get a really, really deep and comprehensive understanding of shadow work, but actually be able to do that practically by yourself, on yourself. I have Cameron's channel linked below if you're watching on my channel. It's in the comment and it's in the description box. I can't recommend Cameron or his channel enough. Is there anything that you want to say, Cameron?
Yeah. So if you're watching on my channel, I also have Aaron's channel in the description. I'm also going to extend an invitation that if you do feel that you want some support here and you resonate with either me or with Aaron, then feel free to reach out to any one of us, either through our YouTube channel, through my Instagram, and we'd love to support you on this journey, whoever you resonate with.
Beautiful. Yeah. Okay. See you guys later.